Coming up today, the International Monetary Fund cuts its global growth forecast for this year to 3.3%, citing weaker than expected economic gains in the United States. The tensions brewing over Japan's latest attempt to whitewash history. A report has emerged that shows that in the late 1990s, international experts said Japan's wartime conscription of Korean workers violated a convention banning forced labor. First, Korea's main opposition party is insisting some $5 billion be knocked off the government's supplementary budget proposal. The ruling party says the entirety needs to be approved to boost the struggling economy. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's Friday noon on Friday, the 10th of July. You're tuned into our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this afternoon, the International Monetary Fund has downgraded its global growth forecast for this year, citing a weak first quarter in the United States. It also identified the Eurozone and China as possible flashpoints, although it left their growth outlooks untouched. Son Jong-in starts us off.
In its revised World Economic Outlook released on Thursday, the IMF lowered its growth forecast for the global economy this year to 3.3%, down from its April prediction of 3.5%. The latest figure represents the slowest pace of growth since it dipped below zero in 2009 during the height of the global financial crisis. The organization identified the U.S. economy's weaker than expected first quarter performance as the main reason for its trimmed outlook. The IMF cut its U.S. growth forecast for the year to 2.5% from 3.1%. As for China, the fund left its forecast unchanged at 6.8%, saying the recent stock market rout there pales in size to China's massive economy.
The first one is the puncture of what was rather obviously a stock market bubble. Stock markets had increased by 150% in less than a year.
The IMF also maintained its forecast for a pickup in growth in the Eurozone at 1.5%, as it predicts the debt crisis in Greece will have a marginal effect on the global economy.
The mechanical links between Greece and the rest of the world are limited, be it on the trade side or the finance side. That's reassuring.
The organization advised advanced economies to keep accommodative monetary policy measures in place to support economic activity and boost inflation. Korea's growth forecast was not included in the revised outlook, but was set at 3.3% in April. Son Jong-in, Arirang News.
Now, Japan's attempts to backtrack from its recent acknowledgement that Korean slave laborers were used at Japanese sites bestowed with the UNESCO World Heritage status has understandably ruffled feathers here in Korea. But adding to the hefty weight of evidence, a local news agency has obtained a 15-year-old report from the International Labour Organization that shows forced labor did take place at those facilities. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Yonhap News Agency reported on Friday that forced labor at Japanese industrial facilities was proven to be fact 16 years ago. The Seoul-based agency obtained the International Labour Organization report from March of 1999, which states that thousands of Koreans and Chinese were forcefully mobilized to the industrial facilities during World War II. At the time, the ILO labeled the forced mobilization as a violation of the convention. The report lists numerous testimonies of mistreatment and harsh working conditions, which resulted in many deaths. The fatality rate of workers averaged roughly 18%, with some facilities at nearly 29%. The report also revealed that, unlike what was promised, most workers received little or no pay. The statement read by the Japanese ambassador to UNESCO on Sunday acknowledged that there were a large number of Koreans and others that were forced to work. The ILO's Forced Labor Convention states, the term forced or compulsory labor shall mean any work for service under the menace penalty, which a person has not offered voluntarily. However, Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga maintains that the work at the facility did not constitute a violation. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, meeting with the Unification Preparation Committee this morning, President Park Geun-hye said the two Koreas need to cooperate to protect Koreans on both sides of the border amid the spread of new diseases around the world. Regarding steps to strengthen inter-Korean cooperation in healthcare, the president asked the committee to begin providing vaccines and antibiotics for North Koreans suffering from tuberculosis or rubella. In the long run, she said the two Koreas, with the cooperation of neighboring countries like China and Japan, could contribute to establishing a firm disease response system in the region. Despite the assessment that Pyongyang has shown little intent to resume dialogue with Seoul lately, President Park said her administration is always open to renewing dialogue and cooperation. A U.S. expert on North Korea claims a biopesticides research center in Pyongyang is capable of producing biological weapons. Melissa Hanma, who is a senior research associate at the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies, made the judgment after analyzing photos of leader Kim Jong-un's visit to the Pyongyang Biotechnical Institute last month. She thinks the facility could actually be producing military-sized batches of biological weapons that includes anthrax. The expert also said the North State media released the photos of Kim at the facility as a veiled threat to South Korea and the United States. North Korea recently accused Washington of targeting it with biological weapons after it emerged the U.S. Defense Department mistakenly shipped live anthrax to some labs around the world, including a U.S. airbase right here in South Korea. The U.S. Army has confirmed that it's going to reduce the number of troops to 450,000 over the next 2 years due to budget cuts. When reports first emerged about the latest downsizing move, U.S. troops in South Korea were predicted not to be affected, but with the official announcement, questions now hang over the size of the deployment in the years to come. Na Hyung-young has the details.
From October, the U.S. Army will gradually begin cutting the number of active duty troops by 40,000. By 2017, the number of troops will have dropped from the current 490,000 to 450,000, the smallest number since 1940. USA Today reported about the cuts earlier this week, but citing military sources in Washington, Korean media outlets said the number of American troops in South Korea would remain the same. However, following the U.S. Army's official announcement in Virginia on Thursday, that information might have been wide of the mark.
Unfortunately, under sequestration and automatic budget cuts, today's announcement may not be the last. Unless the provisions of the Budget Control Act are changed or reversed, the Army will have to cut an additional 30,000 soldiers by 2019.
U.S. Army officials say this will affect nearly every Army installation inside and outside of the United States. And experts and critics say the consequences of the budget-driven decision will extend far beyond the Korean Peninsula. Senator John McCain, chairman of the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee, has called the plan dangerous. And Randy George, the Army official who led Thursday's press conference, also added later that the extra cuts could put the U.S. at significant risk. Since 2012, the U.S. Army has already cut 80,000 soldiers, shuttering 13 brigade combat teams, including 2 in Germany and 1 in South Korea. Na Hyun-young, Arirang News.
An Italian company which sells surveillance software to government and private agencies all around the world, including Korea, has found itself the victim of a hacking attack. This happened earlier this week. A Twitter account run by the Milan-based company Hacking Team was taken over by hackers to post what is alleged to have been more than 400 gigabytes of the company's internal documents, including emails and financial data, for hackers to download. Now, the list of the company's customers who purchased the spyware is said to include an organization called the 5163 Army Division from South Korea. Now to the latest on the Greek debt crisis, and the debt-ridden country has submitted a new proposal to its international creditors, offering deeper than expected economic reforms. That said, Athens is also asking for more in return. Han Da-eun reports.
In a last-ditch effort to save itself from imminent financial collapse, Greece has offered to make painful spending cuts, pension reforms and raise taxes. Eurozone officials say Greece proposed austerity measures between 12 to 13 billion euros that'll be carried out over the next 2 years. The measures include raising taxes and VAT rates, phasing out solidarity grants for pensioners by 2019, and cutting the defense budget by up to 300 million euros by 2016. The proposal calls for 4 billion euros more than the previous bailout terms voted down by the Greek referendum. That may please the cash-strapped nation's creditors, but Athens has also increased its demands. Greece is requesting a new 53.5 billion euro bailout package and debt restructuring of some 320 billion euros. Athens is planning to make more concessions than expected to prevent defaulting on its upcoming set of repayments. However, difficulties are expected as Germany, its biggest creditor nation, strongly opposes any kind of debt restructuring.
I have said that a classic haircut is out of the question for me, and that hasn't changed between yesterday and today.
Greece's radical leftists will be another hurdle to overcome. The hardline members of the Syriza party are expected to criticize the austerity measures contained in the new proposal when the Greek parliament votes on Friday. Athens' new offer will be discussed by the Eurozone finance ministers on Saturday prior to a full EU leaders summit slated for Sunday. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
Now back here in Korea, and the nation's main rival parties are locking horns over the government's multi-billion-dollar supplementary budget plan. The ruling Saenuri party wants to pass the $10.4 billion plan in its original form by July 20th. But the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is demanding around $5 billion be cut from the proposal. The party says it recognises extra stimulus is needed to boost the livelihoods of ordinary people and to help the economy overcome the MERS outbreak and the ongoing drought, but it cannot accept that $5 billion is being used to cover a tax revenue deficit. Responding to the claims, the ruling party said the goal of the supplementary budget is to stimulate the economy. Korea's import and export prices have climbed for the second consecutive month on the back of a stronger dollar against the local currency in June. The Bank of Korea says June's import price index went up 0.6% on month despite the drop in oil prices. The Korean won slid by roughly 2% against the greenback in June compared to the month before, offsetting the drop in Dubai crude prices that ticked down 3.5%. The country's export price index increased as well, up 1.2% from May. Korea is getting ready to launch a new index of 30 blue-chip companies that represent the country's economic structure. The K-Top 30, as it's called, aims to better reflect Korea's economy, but some are already questioning if this new index will be able to achieve its ambitious goal. Kim Min-ji has more.
The K-Top 30 index, modeled after the U.S. Dow Jones Industrial Average, will launch next week. It will consist of 30 major companies chosen based on their market capitalization, such as Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor, and SK Hynix, as well as financial groups and IT companies.
It's our hope that the K-Top 30 index will become a leading index that can help invigorate the Korean economy.
The launch comes amid calls for the local stock market to better reflect the country's economic growth. Since 1980, Korea's GDP has grown 36-fold, while the main Kospi index has only risen 19-fold. The K-Top 30 will only include companies with shares priced at less than 500,000 won, or roughly $440 in order to promote active trading. Samsung Electronics, whose share price is well over $1,000, will be subject to adjustment.
We have decided to bring on Samsung Electronics. However, we will apply an adjustment calculation of 0.5 to its share price to limit its position when generating the index.
The next question is how effective the new index will actually be. In addition to the benchmark Kospi, the local bourse operator runs over 130 sub-indices, including the Kospi 200. But these smaller indices have existed more or less in name only, as they are less popular among investors because they don't reflect real market conditions.
We need confirmation that the new index can guarantee stable returns. Instead of seeking immediate recognition, it would be better to think of its development in the long term.
The index's fate will now depend on how many financial products related to it are created and how fast they are sold. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And now, before we go, a quick look at the weather, because summer has well and truly arrived in Korea, with temperatures forecast to reach up to 34 degrees Celsius in some parts of the country today. Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province, as well as Gangwon-do province, are under heatwave alerts right now. Further south, the high seas watch from Typhoon Chanhom is still in effect in waters around Jeju Island. On Saturday, it will be cloudy across the nation as that typhoon makes its way north. And that typhoon as well will bring rain to most of the country's southern regions tomorrow. Clouds are expected to linger throughout the weekend, and they're going to bring heavy rain to Seoul and Gangwon-do province on Sunday. And those are the stories we have for you on this Friday afternoon here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website. We do have a new address. It's arirang.com now. Have a wonderful weekend. See you Monday. Goodbye.